Hello, everyone. I'm Margaret. I'm a ML GDE from Seattle. And today, please welcome Hannes, ML GDE from Portland, to chat with us. Hello, Hannes. How are you doing today?
Hi, Margaret. Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you so much for chatting with us today. So, to get started, could you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Yeah. As you said, my name is Hannes. I'm a machine learning GDE, and I'm also a machine learning engineer at Digits. We are a company where we're trying to assist business owners and accountants to understand their businesses in real time. And so that involves lots of machine learning, as you can imagine. And on top of that, I had the chance to co-author machine learning publications, one about natural language processing and one about machine learning pipelines. And that springboarded me into some community work around TensorFlow Extended and TensorFlow Extended add-ons.
Great, thanks. Yes, I remember your book, Building Machine Learning Pipelines. Right here, this book with Catherine Nelson, and I was a technical reviewer for it. And that's the great thing about being an MLGD is that we get to collaborate with each other, right?
Yeah.
So speaking about being MLGD, how did you become an MLGD?
I can't remember exactly when I became a GD. I think it was at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. But the way it started for me was I was involved in machine learning projects, and we constantly had this problem that we failed to deploy machine learning models effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So we did this approach like we had a Flask endpoint or some Django endpoint back in the day. We loaded the models in there, and that always felt like broken. And so I got that brought me into the sort of TensorFlow ecosystem, and then I learned about TensorFlow serving and did some experiments with this, and then I started giving talks because I felt like this is a really novel solution.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, somebody from Google reached out and was like, "Hey, we saw you giving this talk. Do you want to be a GD?"
Great. So yeah, so they reached out to you because you're giving talks, right? Raise the get some visibility. And what do you like the most about being an MLGDE?
It's definitely the community of people. Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
every time you get a chance to meet people virtually or in person, there is like somebody you either meet new people or you meet people you have met before, but then the new conversations coming up. There's like you walk away from those conversations like inspired and like with new ideas for your own projects, and there's like
Mm-hmm.
often collaborations coming up in those conversations and projects where people work together as lots of good ideas. And it's also the insights and like what's happening at Google and like having a chance to try out certain products maybe before they're generally available and things like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Try out the previews and provide feedback, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So could you share with us some of the projects that you've been working on, whether it's at work or just community open source projects?
Yeah, so at work, we have focused on a number of very specific machine learning projects. And I just want to mention two of them, but
Mm-hmm.
there's way more of what we do behind the scenes, but like maybe two just to pick two, which is sort of like most the easiest to visualize right now. So one is we for the number of years, my coworker and I we have built up an expertise in this field called similarity based machine learning. And
Mm-hmm.
so at Digits, we use this to help accountants to do any variety of tasks. Like, for example, we can help them to classify new transactions, to find vendors for new transactions, to
Mm-hmm.
spot errors in their ledger, to help them to go back in history and see have their patterns of their own classifications changed and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way we do this is we instead of classifying a transaction to say this is category A or category B,
Mm-hmm.
we generate a vector for a given transaction, and then we look up similar vectors through cosine similarity or approximate nearest neighbors, um, and then derive the information from the similarity uh, vectors.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an interesting uh, project in machine learning because it goes beyond like the typical classification approach. And I have to explain there a little bit the backstory. Is like accounting is very subjective. So there is not like a single machine learning model where we could say like, if you see this transaction, this is going to be category B or category A. Some accountant might say this is A, some other accountant might say this is B. They're both correct, but they have to be consistent. So that's why they cannot just flip-flop between A and B. So the similarity-based machine learning is a big one. And then last year we picked up an interesting work, which nowadays becomes more and more important, about generative machine learning. And then we started training our own generative models in-house to assist business owners and accountants with some generative tasks. Like accountants have often the problem that they don't know what this transaction is about. And that's usually when our machine learning model also fails. And so we built this little model where if we see a transaction and we help the accountant to write the question. And so instead, the accountant sits there and types and figures out like what could be the prompt here. And like we just do it for the accountant and they just can choose between different personas. And then we write the questions for them and ship them to the client.
That's very interesting. So I'm going to go back to the previous example that you were talking about, and I'll come to the second one. The first one is on the similarity-based machine learning. It's very interesting that you're actually using that to do a classification, right? Is that right? You kind of do a search and you help with classification. I mean, the end goal or the task is actually classification, right?
Yeah, it is a very subjective classification, yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I have worked on similarity-based machine learning before as well, but the work that I've done is more on images, like searching similar images. But it works exactly the same. You have to calculate the vector, the distances to find out the similarity. Yeah, that's a very interesting. You use that in accounting. And then the second one is you talk about generative AI, like to help them with descriptions. Could you tell me a little bit more about what kind of description? Are you talking about a transaction, like accounting transaction description? Like, just give me a more concrete example of the transaction.
Happy to. So there might be a transaction in your books or in your bank account which says like Starbucks, California, 10/12, right? So on the 12th of October, you had like a charge of like $10.20 from Starbucks. And the question from the accountant might be, is this a travel expense or or do you want to book this as a meal expense? The accountant doesn't have the context in this moment, so he or she has to reach out to the customer and say like, can you give me a little bit more context? And when we interviewed accountants, they said, oh yeah, it's always very tiring. It's like you have to write an email, then you have to tie back the email back into back to the accounting platform. So in our tool, we built this right into the product, and then we also we know the transaction in that moment. We know it was Starbucks. We know it was in California. We know it was a certain date. That are plenty of information for us to write a question automatically. And when we showed this to the accountants, they told us this is great because like they would always use one phrase like, what is this? Or can you tell me more? And as a client, you would get 50 times the same question every month. And now they get like very specific targeted questions. So like they get more signal and less noise. So their clients are happier with like, hey, there's actually a specific question. The accountant is happy because we don't have to write them anymore. So it's a perfect, in my mind, it's a perfect example for like a good use case for a generative machine learning.
Okay, I got it. I think I kind of misunderstood when you first told me about the scenario. I thought you were trying to categorize what the transaction was, but you were actually talking about giving that transaction the model will help create a very relevant question for the accountant to ask the person who filed the expense report, right?
Yeah.
And then because the question is so targeted and very relevant, instead of saying what it is, it's very good in a good way of communicated, they are more likely to get a good response
Yeah.
back, right?
And,
Okay.
and then we have another machine learning model. If the client, or when the client responds, from the response, we get the category and then do the categorization work from there. So there's
Okay.
like lots of machine learning in this workflow, just to solve that sort of like seemingly simple problem of like, we have a ledger, we need to categorize the entries in that ledger. And
Yeah.
I don't know if we can share this in the show notes, but we do have blog posts about every step we talked here,
Yes.
and where we go into some details.
Yeah, absolutely. I will share all the links to your blog posts in the show
Thank you.
notes. Yeah. Yeah, great. And thank you for sharing with me those two projects. And what are some of the other projects, like community related projects or?
Yeah, so in machine learning, like during my work, I always notice that we in the industry we have trouble of like reproducing machine learning models and making really getting to a really good return on invest on our machine learning projects. And one remedy for that is very good machine learning discipline,
Right.
and that is something what I think we can do with good machine learning engineering or ML ops, and using patterns in our training processes and data preparation steps and model analysis steps. And so at Digits, we did this wonderful project where we build out machine learning pipelines. We have basically our own little keras for TensorFlow Extended behind the scenes. And that allows us to bring up pipelines very quickly. And every machine learning pipeline is highly standardized, so we can compare our models. And so then in my non-work life, I have the chance to help out on the TensorFlow Extended side, and I can help the community as a community leader and like help the conversation in the TensorFlow Extended realm. We have a special interest group for TensorFlow Extended add-ons, where folks from Twitter, Apple, Spotify, Digits, and so on, they share components, and it's a great community to discuss typical problems we see in our day-to-day space, and to share experiences and learnings. And so that's what I spend most of my community machine learning time on.
Yes, I noticed that you have quite a few blog posts published on the official TensorFlow blog post publication online, right? And then are they all related to TensorFlow serving and machine learning pipeline?
They're all related to TensorFlow Extended and TensorFlow Serving and TFX, or the TFX pipelines. It all falls under the umbrella of like TensorFlow Extended. So that includes like TensorFlow Transform, TensorFlow Data Validation, TensorFlow Model Analysis, and so on.
Right. Great. Thank you for sharing with me the projects that, with work or in the open source. I think you have also shared recently, you shared with me you have another recent project. Is it on ChatGPT for accounting? Or did we already talked about that one?
That is the generation
The
project.
second one. The second one, right? So yeah, you already shared with me about that. Just tell me a bit about your view on ChatGPT. Like, what is the impact? Obviously, the example you already told me, right? The huge impact. Tell me some of the the benefits and the downside, that you think about ChatGPT, or some of the current constraints or limitations.
Yeah, I think when right now we're recording this year at the end of March, GPT-4 has just dropped basically a few days ago, and we're using GPT-4 for a couple of days or weeks now, and the results are like highly interesting, but also terrifying. And so I think the benefits are that it democratizes the entire machine learning field to the extent that anybody can access the high-level machine learning models.
Right.
That comes at the cost of like understanding what is actually happening behind the scenes. And so I can see the benefits of like domain experts who aren't like the experts in machine learning can now use a simple API to solve some of their day-to-day problems, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But my concern is that it is still a stochastic parrot. And so we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We haven't seen the data set that it was trained on. We don't really know when the model is being updated, how is it being updated. Right now, we can't fine tune GPT-4. There's like all sorts of things where I feel very much like this is not. Do I really want to build a business or a project around it? That's sort of the big question mark I have. And then we have additional questions of like, what are the privacy constraints, or what is being done on the OpenAI side around like bias detection in the data set itself. I think we'll need to learn in the next couple of weeks a lot more about what is actually happening behind the scenes. And I really hope that OpenAI is open as they say they are, and that they share those details in the coming weeks.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on the Chat GPT with us. And in terms of the privacy, are you referring to like if me as a user, I'm typing these questions and the platform is recording all my questions, right? Is that the concern?
Yes. So I think, to give you a very concrete example, when people sign up to our platform, we promise them that we treat their data at the utmost with the utmost security. So we have above and beyond security standards for our own network. But if we, for example, would use an API, an external API, then the data, first of all, leaves our premise, and B, we don't know what they do with the data. So are they training the next model?
Right.
Does the the next version might hallucinate on customer data? I don't know. Right. And those are the things where even when they say in the privacy or in the terms and conditions them they don't want to do this, nothing stops them from doing them.
Right. Yeah. Great. So we've talked about a couple of your work projects as well as open source projects. And do you have any other topics that you would like to discuss?
I think it's a good moment when we talk about machine learning, that, and especially these days where like a lot of great projects are coming up and like APIs opening up with like wonderful tools. The last couple of years we have been so busy with like talking about tooling. Lots of startups came up in the realm of ML ops, and we were so busy coming up with tools and frameworks and things like this that we totally forgot about like what are the problems we were actually trying to solve here. Right. And I think nowadays it's perfect that we can go back and say like, okay, here are the actual problems, and whether it could be an accounting problem where we solve with digits, or it could be a medical problem of like, here's like radiology images, and maybe somebody can build a machine learning model much easier now to detect a very rare type of cancer and then help other people. I think we really need to think about machine learning in the terms of helping people, not hurting them. And I'm really, really happy, and I'm really looking forward to 2023, because now we can actually talk about projects again, and we don't have to worry about the tools.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Like we should not be focusing on the tools or the algorithms or the state of art, only, the technical part. We need to look at like these different fields, right? In different industry and the application and fields. How can we use machine learning to actually help make our lives better, right?
Yeah. That's the grand goal of like machine learning from the start. And maybe as a field, we might have gotten distracted by shiny objects and high valuations of ML ops startups and things like this. Let's focus on the real problems again.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Hannes, for chatting with us today. Are you going to any conferences later on this year? I haven't seen you in person since 2019.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think in at the end of May, I'm going to the Google North America Connect conference in Miami. So maybe I can meet you there.
Yeah, that sounds great. I plan to participate as well. I look forward to seeing you, meet you again in person soon.
Wonderful. See you then.
Great. Yeah, great. See you soon. Bye
See
bye.
ya. Bye.